and we're the first women's organization that was founded on social media. We work totally on social media. We have about 250 different Facebook groups, so if you can imagine an office building, 250 floors, each one of our groups is a floor that has a department or a state group. So Harriet asked me to talk a little bit about how Unite Women even started, which I'll do a little bit, but the main focus is really what we were talking about, or Harriet was talking about earlier, is what we need to do between now and November, because that's really more important. Some of you, I know Harriet, Kless, and Marjorie, by the way, thank you for all your work and your team's work. They were part of the original rallies that were planned. I guess instead of standing on my toes, I could do this. I'm not that tall. We held 55 rallies in 45 states on April 28th in 2012. And the way that all started is like probably most of you, because I'm going to assume that you're here, so you're aware, you're engaged. What we need to talk about is the people who are not engaged. But like most of you, I was hearing about transvaginal probe legislation, personhood legislation. There was a photograph of an all-male panel testifying on my behalf and your behalf on birth control for Daryl Issa, and Sandra Fluke was denied testimony. And I had met a woman online campaigning for Obama in 2008, and we established a relationship so that we would call each other when we were really pissed and when we were really ecstatic about something going on. And we were beside ourselves. We thought, what in the world is happening to our country? I mean, if anybody has a right to say we want our country back, it's us. And where are the women? Where are people protesting? And so we hung up, and I was a newbie on social media. I looked down on my Facebook page, and there was a little thing that said create a group. That's how much thought went into this. And so I clicked on create a group, created Organizing Against the War on Women. Called my friend back up in New York and said, we just have to post this and we'll see what happens. It might be the two of us taking to the streets. The next morning we woke up and we had over 500 people who had asked to join. Within a week we had 12,000 people. And we obviously hit the tipping point of the anger and the frustration. So that's kind of the beginning of all the work that went into organizing the rallies on April 28th in 2012. Within about a week of that, I realized that this was more than holding rallies. I mean, rallies are great for getting people energized, but usually the people that show up at rallies are those that are pretty much already energized and already engaged, and how do we get beyond that? And so, I never had the intention of creating an organization, but I put in my head that on 4/29, I was going to start working towards putting an organization together, and that's how UniteWomen.org came to fruition. Since then, we have created UniteWomen.org Action, which is our 501c4, and UniteWomen.org is our C3. So for all of our educational type of messaging and efforts, that falls under the C3, and there are things like our Unite Against Rape campaign. If you are not familiar with that, you can go on our Facebook page or on our website. That really stemmed out of the Steubenville, Ohio case, where once the verdict came down, people like Candy Crawley and the mainstream media felt more sorry for the high school athletes, that they wouldn't be able to pursue an athletic career than they did for the victim, and which is pretty typical. But when it reached a mainstream media level, we said we have to do something, so we created the Unite Against Rape campaign in support of Jane Doe of Steubenville, and we had amazing response to that, not only of people sharing their stories, victims, supporters, but then once a few celebrities learned about it, they contacted us and said we want to get involved. And That was never the intention, but they do make it a bigger voice. We created a campaign called I'm a Good Woman. That really was a partnership with the Abortion Care Network and Northland Family Planning, and it came out of, let me ask you all this, since we're small enough, we can talk to each other. How many people have ever been on food stamps? How many people have ever been on Medicaid? How many people have been a single woman taking birth control? How many people have ever had an abortion? You are all the cause of all of our problems, you know. How many people have ever worked for a union? You're all being demonized. We are the problem. You know, they cannot help us because we're the takers. But they'll help oil companies with subsidies. They'll help Monsanto with farm subsidies, but they cannot help people, really more the working poor who need the help. And we give back to the economy when we do that. So we created the I'm a Good Woman campaign where people submitted, you know, what is the one thing in their life that happened to them that now they're being demonized about? And we created a video, and it just showed the photographs of these women, and it was, underneath it says, I'm a good woman. And it was really interesting because there were many women who had gone through abuse, rape, just some horrible, horrible things, and they said just the idea that someone was referring to them as a good woman made so much difference in their lives. So things like that fall under our C3. On the C4 side, which is pretty much what we're going to talk more about today, two campaigns that we're focused on top of just getting out the vote and election. One is Know Your Candidates, where we do profiles. And again, you can go on our Facebook page or our website, and there's side-by-sides of candidates. We are bipartisan. We focus on the issues. So what we do is we basically take all the issues that pertain to women, and there's hardly an issue that doesn't affect women and their families. And we basically outline where the candidates fall on those issues based on their voting record or quotes. And it's pretty obvious which candidate supports women and which candidate does. But we don't endorse, but we make it very, very clear where the candidate stands on our issues. And then the other campaign that we have launched is called Laws of Two Nations. Imagine if you were to take the bills that the U.S. House has passed in the last, 4 years? I'm sure you can think of a few. I don't know if I have to name them. And their complaint is they pass all these laws and Harry Reid will not take them up for a vote in the Senate. And of course he won't, because they're not going to pass and the president is not going to sign them. Now imagine if all of the bills that either the Senate introduced and were filibustered, or that Obama proposed and were never taken up for a vote. Imagine if all those bills that the House passed actually became law. It's kind of scary. Now imagine if all of the bills proposed by the Senate and President Obama were passed and made into law. We have two very different countries. Very different countries. So this campaign really boils it down. We started with the party platforms, which I do want to talk about today because I understand that in your state there were some things removed from the Nevada state platform for the GOP, but there is a GOP platform and a Democratic Party platform. And that's really what overall the parties stand for. And you can look at those on everything and determine which party is really representing me. So we started with that, just outlining things like gay rights, women's reproduction rights, pay equality, all of these kinds of things that are outlined in the platforms, and just said, here's where they stand. Now imagine if this became law, imagine if this became law. So it's the law of 2 nations. Now it's really important, obviously, to know each specific candidate as you go in to vote. We very much encourage people to do that, but it's also important to understand the big picture. Because if you think about it, throughout the states, and I don't know how aware you are of what is happening throughout the country, but hundreds and hundreds, actually thousands have been introduced, but hundreds have been passed in terms of women's reproductive rights in many, many of the states. And the reason that has happened is because in many states, the party that is not supporting women's rights and is really pushing for really the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and they're finding ways to get around that, they have taken over either the Senate and the House and the governorship. So when you look at a state like Virginia, and you might say, why am I bringing up Virginia? I'm in Nevada. Because it's a perfect state to look at where they were before their last election and what they passed. And now they have a Democratic governor, a Democratic lieutenant governor, and control of one of the houses. And they're already, well, their election was last November, they're already reversing some of the legislation that was passed under the old governorship. So it's really important to look at the big picture and say, where is my state Senate? Where is my state House? Where is my governorship? And then on the federal level, obviously you have the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House in terms of who needs to be voted in so that we can either maintain the Senate with pro-women candidates and possibly take over the House. Because that's the only way we're going to make a difference. So it's really important to take over to look at the big picture in terms of where that is. So let me ask you, I'm going to read out some names of organizations, and I'd love to know, as soon as you kind of get it, tell me what you think they have in common. Americans for Prosperity. Okay, come on, let me read a few more. And some of these you might not know. Heritage Action for America, Concerned Veterans for America, Freedom, I love their titles, they are so good at wordsmithing. Freedom Partners, American Energy Alliance, Concerned Women for American Action, 60 Plus Association, National Federation of Independent Business, Club for Growth, Americans for Tax Reform, Center to Protect Patient Rights, Chamber of Commerce, ALEC, everybody heard of ALEC? American Legislative Exchange Council, and Americans United for Life. All of those organizations, and there are more, but all of those organizations are directly or indirectly funded by a political network set up by the Koch brothers, all of them. Why is that important? I don't know if you have this here in Nevada. I'm from Michigan. We have it in Michigan. Yay! It's a little cooler in Michigan right now. We have I can't even tell you how many times a day I see commercials with people with their sob stories about how the Affordable Care Act, or they call it Obamacare, has ruined their lives. And that the senator that's running for the U.S. Senate voted for it, and so he should be voted out. There's a way to know who's funding those ads. And it's at the end of the commercial, you're going to see funded by Americans for Prosperity. And you know it's the Koch brothers. And you need to start telling people that, because they are outright lies. The case in Michigan, the woman that they really were promoting, it was all fabricated. And what I'm learning throughout the country is in states where they're doing this. Are they doing this in Nevada? Yeah. Okay, so you probably are very familiar with this, and the story is probably not true. And yet, look at people, the way people are looking at Obamacare, their attitude about Obamacare. And it's all based on lies and millions and millions and millions of dollars of Koch money. And we have to combat that. Um, okay, so here are a few other organizations. What do the Americans United for Life, or you may know them as AUF, ALEC, have in common? They write the laws, they sell the laws, they work with corporations and with politicians. Politicians are not writing the laws anymore, guys. ALEC goes in after meeting primarily with corporate interest and introduces, writes legislation, and then lobbies for it and sells it to the candidates. The candidates take it and pass it, try to pass it. So all of these laws for reproductive rights, all of these laws for right to work, the new laws, I call them the discrimination laws, they call them the religious freedom laws, all written by these two organizations. This is our country now, and most people do not know this. They do not know this. Specifically, I'm going to ask you, between 2001 and 2010, so before the takeover of the U.S. House, how many abortion restrictions were actually enacted throughout the country? Correct. Lots of them were introduced. Between 2001 and 2010, so almost a decade, there were 189. How many do you think there's been since then? Actually, this is not including 2014. There were 205 in just 2 years. Over 3,000 were introduced. But the focus is on jobs, right? Yeah. When you look at the platforms, it's really, and really most of the candidates fall within this. But you have to understand, there are some Democrats that don't fall within this, and there are Republicans who do. So that's why we truly are nonpartisan, and we try to look at the issues. They're fewer and far between, but these days, because let's face it, with Republicans, even if they were moderate, they can't afford to be anymore. They have to appeal to minorities, which is such a small minority, but they have such clout. So, you know, you're dealing with a platform, and I understand that in Nevada they took out, was it women's reproductive rights, that they took that out of the platform, and was it gay rights? Yes. I challenge, it's really unfortunate because I was hoping to what? GOP, yes, they're the Nevada State GOP platform. That their focus is going to be more on the economy, and they're just taking that out of the platform. Well, I will tell you, I have a governor in Michigan who vowed that he would not sign any legislation that would affect abortion rights in Michigan when he was elected. Oh, and he's not the only one. I mean, it's in their platform. It's what they stand for. Isn't that nice that they're making this promise? Why are they making this promise? You have to challenge them one-on-one and ask them what their intention is. What if their party goes back on this? What will they do as an individual if they get elected? Because right now, their platform is they want to privatize Medicare. They want to block grant Social Security. They have, how many times have they refused to vote for unemployment extension? But I don't know if you read, I was on vacation and I still kind of kept up, that they voted to give more tax cuts to people, to the wealthy this last week, and it was $85 billion, didn't have to be paid for. Where are the priorities? Obviously, they're refusing to increase the minimum wage. There are massive cuts to food stamp programs. They actually have passed in the House and are really pushing to pass in the Senate the 20-week abortion ban. Now, some people may say, and this is what we hear all the time, you should know if you want to have an abortion by 20 weeks, right? Talk to people who, most people, first of all, only 1.5% of all abortions performed after 20 weeks. Only 1.5%. Of those, almost all of them are because of the health of the mother or the health of the fetus. Most of these women who go in for abortions after 20 weeks or approaching 20 weeks now do it because they want the child, but they're dealing with issues. And now you have doctors who, even if they're at 19 weeks, they're afraid to perform it because what if they're a little off? They're going to be sued. So, you know, if you pull a 20-week abortion ban, a majority of people are for it because they don't understand. Because the line is, you should know if you want an abortion by 20 weeks. It's a great line. Unfortunately, well, it's just outright lying. And they have that in the U.S. House. They've already passed it. And there is a team of people in the Senate that are trying to get Harry Reid to bring it up for a vote, which he's not going to do. But imagine what will happen if the Senate reverses in November. Not only will things like that be passed, and yes, President Obama can veto everything, but where are we as a country? How do we benefit from that? We don't progress at all. And I guarantee you, if they take the Senate, he will be impeached. That'll be the first thing they'll do, because the House has wanted to impeach him all along. They have voted against the Fair Pay Act. They voted against Lilly Ledbetter. So anything that affects us, and environmental concerns, look at what's been held up there, and that affects women and their families. So I'm going to wrap it up just by saying, if legislation wasn't scary enough, I'm just going to read a few quotes of some of the rhetoric, because that is the other thing that really, I don't know about you, but it just sends me to a boiling point. I'm not going to say who said it, but some of them you're going to recognize. Here's one. This is by a woman, legislator. We are losing the respect that we so dearly won in the workplace by bringing up all these special bills for women and almost making us look like whiners. These are our legislators. This isn't the fringe anymore. This is mainstream stuff. Now this one you might remember. You know, back in my days, they used a Bayer aspirin for contraception. The gals put it in between their knees and it wasn't very costly. Paul Ryan, when he was running for the vice president. We're not going to give up on destroying the healthcare system for the American people. That is a direct quote. This one is, well, I shouldn't. If they're a male baby, they may have their hand between their legs. They feel pleasure. Why is it so hard that to think that they couldn't feel pain? This is all about trying to bring abortion down to like 6 weeks, saying that babies, fetuses, experience a pain. So this is their proof. Rape is kind of like the weather. If it's inevitable, just relax and enjoy it. Women are too busy to fight for economic fairness. Planned Parenthood has been far more lethal to Black lives than the KKK ever was. How insulting is that? And then, I'm sure you've all heard this one. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways of shutting that whole thing down. What do you think? So, homework. This is nice that we all showed up here. And yes, Harry and I know, I know that you wanted more people here, but here's what we can all do. Get out of your comfort zone. We're good at talking to each other. It feels good. People agree with you, right? You don't, I'm not suggesting going and talking to the fringe. I'm talking about talking to other people that are probably going to be somewhat predisposed to your message, but make them understand what's at stake and why it's important to vote in November and in the primary. You have to do that. And then the one thing that we all have to do, vote. You have all the answers. So thank you, and thank you so much, all of you, for, where's Beth? I don't know where he went. Marjorie, there she is, for everybody who put this together. I look forward to speaking to all.